we like to start every single morning with something that I fondly refer to as the jargon of the day. It's like our warm-up for the day, right? We know that this is a jargon-intensive journey, and if you don't make friends with the jargon, man, it slows you up, right? I always say it can sink your battleship, and we don't want that, do we? So we got to make friends with the jargon a little bit at a time, just like how we teach our kids. We're not going to take on a huge task and have this expectation that our child's going to get it the first time, right? We're going to break it down into small little increments and reinforce our child for getting the small little increments, right? Same thing with the jargon for us. We can't expect ourselves to become experts in all of these terms overnight. That would be unrealistic, and it makes us overwhelmed, frazzled, and sleep deprived, frankly. But we still have to get there. So a little bit at a time. We give you a phrase, a word, an anagram a day, go over what the actual definition is, and then give you a more user-friendly definition and try to put it into context. And slowly we build up a repertoire of these words and phrases. Okay, so today's phrase is expressive language. Yesterday it was receptive, and we talked a little bit about expressive, but let's take a look at what the actual definition for expressive language is. The production of language, including speech, signing, and/or gesture for communication. Okay, fairly simple to understand, but let's take it one notch down. Our working definition is the child's ability to communicate their needs. Remember what we were talking about yesterday, if you were watching, that for expressive, I always think of it as the two different directions. Express goes that way. It's what your child is expressing. Remember, it doesn't necessarily have to be vocal. If the child is signing or using an iconic communication system like PECS or using a device, that counts. That's them expressing themselves. We want our children to express themselves, right? Of course we do. And receptive, of course, is what comes this direction. So what they hear and understand. What's so fascinating to me is that I think for a lot of us as parents, we get really nervous about the first signs, that we're concerned about are when our child isn't speaking enough, right? And again, we're going to have Dr. Del Nadowski talking about what some of the red flags are, but that's one of the first things. And I think we get very emotionally attached to, we want to hear the child speaking. It's so important, right? I don't want to belittle that at all, but sometimes we don't realize that there's the whole receptive language aspect of it. So again, I want to remind you that as you go to IEPs and as experts view your child and assess them and come back to you, they're going to talk to you about two different areas, receptive and expressive. And we want both of them to be in a really healthy range. But what's going to help you to teach your child is knowing what these two numbers are and what the relationship is to each other. So if you see that your child is higher in receptive language than expressive language, you're going to approach things in a specific way. And if you see that the expressive language is higher than the receptive language, you're going to do things in a different way. And you can see this in children, when, and sometimes they're both low, but it's important to know what the numbers are and to understand them. It's going to change the way in which you teach your child. Our kids aren't all the same, right? There's no cookie cutter approach to this. We got to really tailor it to each individual child. But you'll see with a child whose receptive language is low that those are the kinds of kids that you hear parents saying, I wonder if they're deaf. I wonder if they've got a hearing problem because the child isn't responding to things that are being said to them. They act as though they don't understand. And a lot of times the child just shuts down because they don't know the information that's coming in. I imagine that if I went, I live in Los Angeles, and so if I go to a store where all the languages that are being spoken in the store are not English, I tune it out. Because I don't understand any of it. And if it's constant and happening around me, I don't respond to it. Somebody could be saying to me, hey lady, you're standing on my foot, and I wouldn't understand it. And they might think that I'm deaf, but I'm not deaf. I just have tuned it out because I don't understand any of it. And our kids can sometimes be the same way. I think sometimes when there's behavioral problems and a child is speaking, we overlook that there may be a receptive receptive language issue. I think that the expressive, we tend to notice it quicker. Not always, but in some cases. So really good to know the difference between the two, to know when your child gets assessed, they're going to bring it up, right? To know what these two things mean and to understand them, because it really is going to change how you begin teaching language to your child.